Hi friends, Benjamin here with another COVID contemplation. So what's on my mind today? Today I am thinking a bit more about hypocrisy in Christians and people leaving the church because of it. I touched on this a bit in my video about the Ravi Zacharias issue, and there's some discussion in the comment section. I wanted to follow up a bit because I had said in that video that I don't understand it. How people would leave the faith because they've seen Christian leaders act like hypocrites. Well, let me talk a little bit more about where I'm coming from on that. I am somebody that I have been on the receiving end of mistreatment by other Christians at some pretty intense levels over the course of my life. When I was in high school, the church I was a part of split. We had a major rift in the church, and because of how my family factored into some of that, I wound up being on the receiving end of a lot of rejection by people that 1 week before, they were my friends. They would have said they loved me. Split happened, and they would not even sit on the pew beside of me. So the whole idea of love your enemies, especially since I had nothing to do with the situation at all, yeah, that didn't come into play. And I have known over the years multiple Christian leaders that I've admired that where I have found out stuff about them that was pretty devastating. The thing with Ravi Zacharias, those that knew me in college knew I was a big-time Ravi fan and have long admired a lot of his work. Well, yeah, that was a tough thing to see happen and be revealed. So, but I still go back to this. Christian leaders acting immorally doesn't change whether or not Jesus rose again from the dead. Other Christians misbehaving doesn't change whether Jesus rose again from the dead. At the end of the day, that does nothing for the truth of the gospel. If anything, it continues to show that there is a standard that we're falling short. Which brings us to another question, and that is, how are we defining hypocrisy? Because that's actually a relevant question in all of this. There's a study put out by the Barna Group that looked at young people leaving the faith, and also another one about how non-believers see Christians. Well, hypocrisy factored in on both, but how they understood hypocrisy is a little bit different from how I've often thought of it. So, for me, I've often seen hypocrisy as I say one thing, but then I am secretly doing something else. So, we see Christians claiming to believe one thing about what's right and wrong, but then secretly they are doing something completely different from it. And yeah, that's hypocrisy. Most people would say that. But a lot of people today are defining hypocrisy as articulating a standard that it's not that they're not even trying to meet it, it's that they can't meet it, that type of thing. So for Christians, many of us would say that, yeah, we affirm the call to a standard that we can't meet, that we know we can't meet, but we are going to continue to try to grow and let the Lord develop us into people that walk in greater holiness. Because for us, really, the standard is moral perfection, if you will. And most of us will even say we can't meet that in this lifetime. But what we are going to do is acknowledge our shortcomings consistently. And I think maybe that's where some of the claim of hypocrisy comes in, is that very often people don't hear us acknowledging our shortcomings and our failures, so they see us as trying to hide them entirely. And at that point, yeah, that's a legitimate ding against the church. And it seems like every Christian tradition, this factors in to some degree. And that's really unfortunate, because more often than not, it's when we are open about our shortcomings it's when we are open about our brokenness as well, that then the community gets to walk with us in a process of healing and recovery. But when our churches aren't a safe place for people to say, well, you know what, I'm actually struggling with the sin issue, or, you know, I have been really wounded in this area and it's still really affecting me. When that is not a safe thing to do any longer, then Christians are more likely to act like hypocrites. Young people are not going to see the growth toward holiness and healing in the home as well. And instead, they're actually probably more likely to have an experience like I had growing up, where, you know, we go to church and it's church face on Sunday, but then in the privacy of the home, it can be hell. I know for me, a lot of my emotional brokenness came from the stuff I experienced in the privacy of my home. But it was stuff that we did not feel like it was safe to talk about on Sunday. Was that hypocritical? Somewhat. Probably. Now, I try to be a lot more open about this, so I don't mind talking about it. But probably not something I'm also going to share in a public YouTube video either. Though somebody gets to know me, talks to me, it's part of my story. I'll share it. So what do we do about this? I think it goes back to what I've been talking about, and that is make churches a safe place for people to share their brokenness and the areas where they're struggling in some way. Maybe that's in small groups, something like that. That can work. But then also be people who are open ourselves. Openly talk about our issues in the right context. I'm not saying we need to air our dirty laundry either. We have to be wise about the when and with whom. But the answer can't be never, because that is where hypocrisy comes in. Now, the problem we may continue to see is, even if we create contexts that are safe for that, sometimes people are going to call hypocrisy in areas where they just never had the opportunity to see Christians that are genuinely trying toward holiness and are openly sharing their issues in certain contexts, but not others. So, obviously, it's got to be a growth process for the church as well, and for us. But, still, go back to my other point though, despite all of this, we still have to accept that no matter how much Christians misbehave, it doesn't change whether Jesus rose again from the dead. And I believe that as we see society growing away from the Christian underpinnings that have long been in place, we've never done it perfectly. Never. We're still people who sin, so yeah, that's not going to happen perfectly. But at the same time, we have long been what some have referred to as a Christ-haunted culture. Enough people within Western society were familiar with the biblical narrative that it was still a part of our cultural makeup. And the moral framework of the culture was still rooted very heavily in Judeo-Christian morality. Again, we fell short a lot. And you can see over the centuries a conflict between different movements within the culture and that moral framework. Well, as we are growing away from that, though, as a society where the favorable position the gospel has had within the culture wanes, eventually we're going to see that there may be a little less hypocrisy in the church, because the church and society at large will be ever more at odds again. I mean, that's going quite a ways back, but Christianity has always been persecuted in different parts of the world. Well, we're not going to stay immune to that forever, I think. And few things cleanse the church quite like that. Even though I talked to enough people that have lived in societies where Christians are persecuted, you'll find out that, guess what? Christians can still be hypocrites even then. That happens. Anyway, these are my unedited and unscripted musings on this. Just some thoughts. Feel free to comment down below. Let's get some more discussion going on this, and look forward to seeing what everybody thinks. Take care. God bless.